per million. And after that point, there will be a point of major concern, if not catastrophe, that is forecasted ahead of us. Well, this year, we exceeded 400 parts per million. And some say that is definitely a point of no return. So in that prophecy statement, we need to prepare ourselves for making some serious decisions and changing our lifestyle. And we've always contended it's by choice that humans can make an intellectual decision, a conscious decision to change the way we go, or by force. By force is that nature is going to take its toll. And as Uncle Orrin has always told us, Mother Nature is really mad. She's going to slap us hard. So, we just need to keep that in mind. And thank you again, Brian. Yeah, and in lines with that, over the year, last couple of years, we've at home in Arcata worked with the city of Arcata, and we wanted desperately for them to pass a resolution declaring that the second Monday of October would be the Indigenous Peoples' Day. And about 6 months ago, we said, well, the hell with Arcata. We as Indigenous peoples, we have the right to assert our own self-determination. And we're just going to say, hey, this is Indigenous Peoples' Day. And that's what we did. But yesterday, and given the city of Arcata an opportunity, they can join us, they can come along. So we're proud to say, as of yesterday, the city of Arcata has declared by proclamation the second Monday of every October to be Indigenous Peoples' Day. So, we continue. I would like to introduce a person who is one of my sisters, who was one of the first Native women attorney in the state of California, a trailblazer, the first Native women judge in the state of California. And she brings that knowledge that she's gained in the public arena and brings it back home and established the Yurok Tribal Court and is now a presiding judge with our people. I'd like to introduce Abby Abinanti.
Hi. Okay, I'm going to sit because I'm old and tired for the most part. I want to talk a little bit first about his mom, our mom. She took me in and she didn't have to. And if she hadn't, I'd be roadkill or a drunk on the side of the road. Now she did that without a court order. She did that without even knowing that court orders existed. She did that because it was the right thing to do. Because that was her value. And she, as far as the law goes, I realized about 5 years in that cane really, she didn't really need it. It just enabled her to whack us at a greater distance than her arm length. And she was really fast with that cane. And her other grandchildren who are out there know that. I mean, I don't know how she got it to go so fast. But you had to stay out of range if you had any kind of brain. And we learned that law real quick. And she was good at it, and she did the right thing because it was the right thing. I learned that from her, and then I went on to law school. I've never been a very good student, frankly, but I did go and I did finish, and I remember my first court appearance, and I was with this mentor lawyer, and he introduces me to the judge, and the judge looks at me and in an unguarded moment said, "You can't be a lawyer. She's an Indian." whereupon my poor mentor lawyer just about fell over. And that's the environment that I started working in. And it pretty much was like that. It's different now and not different now. But one of the things, you know, they talk about right now, and one of the topics of my talk here is restorative justice. And restorative justice, to me, you know, I don't know how this happened, but when the invaders come, they take things and then they just name them and then they call them their own. To me, it's our way of doing things. I don't call it restorative justice. I call it the Yurok value. The value of Old Grand, that's the law, you know, and that's the value. But she didn't just have it as a law. She didn't just talk it. She had the practice of it. And that's the whole point. You know, because you can say whatever you want. You can talk about restorative justice, you can talk about the law, you can do all of that. But it isn't the law, it isn't the words that are important. The value is important, and the practice of the value is what's important. You know, so when you devise a legal system, and it's just like what Chris said, you know, that when you can ask them to do it, or you can just do it. You know, we don't have to ask them to do it. We can say, this is what we're going to do. This is who we are. This is our value. And if you created a judicial system on your homeland that looks like their system, it will act like their system, because that's what it is. You know, so it's very important how you set it up, how you enact it, and how your judges, your court personnel, and your people feel about it. Now, part of the problem is a lot of us, particularly in this country, have been treated to an education system that creates mental defaults, so that when you think of a court, you have an image of somebody in a robe, you know what it looks like, because depending on your age, you either watch Perry Mason or Law and Order, so you know what a court is. Okay. But the truth of the matter is, that isn't the only system. You know, and that system is predicated on a couple of things. One is that it will be justice by strangers, that the judge cannot know the people in front of them, all right? And if they're happy with it, I'm happy for them. I worked in it for 20 years. It's not working for them, and you can tell them that over and over, but they stick with it, and I'm like, fine, you know, it's yours, be happy. But the thing I did learn from that was it doesn't work for the people who devised it, so why should I bring it home? And I've never seen our people particularly happy in that situation. So when you come home, you go, okay, what kind of system do we want here? And when I first went home, it was like, well, you can't be the judge because you know this person. Well, that's the point. I know everybody there. If I don't know them, I certainly know their mothers, you know, and their aunts and their fathers, their grandfathers, because we all grew up together. You know, so there's no way I can't know them, or I should pretend like I don't know them. I mean, what's the choice here? But what I said at that point was, you have to remember, we're village people, you know, and I'm sorry, the mic guy told me not to do that. That's bad. Okay. We all knew each other, always. So we could think to ourselves, well, maybe we never had disagreements, but we are Yuroks. I mean, trust me, we had disagreements, okay? So how did we resolve them? We resolved them amongst ourselves. You know, if you would have come there 200 years ago and had a disagreement and said, go find me a stranger to resolve this, they would have thought you were like a little demented. They would have been nice to you because we have good manners, but I mean, really? You know, so the whole thing is, how do you then make a system that works for whatever your values are? And what I've been really working on a lot at home is, okay, here's the values of the villages. How are we going to bring that into practice? Just like old Grant, she didn't go, well, should I get a court order? Should I be a legal guardian? Should I be, no, she just said, go home. And I turned around, she said, no, it's in there. I walked in and that was it. You know, that's the practice. And I always, from that day forward, had a place to go. I would go off to school, I would go off to whatever, but I always had a home after that. You know, I knew what to do after that if I got in trouble. And I only thought I was in trouble till I got home. Okay. And I was fast then too. I don't get how she could get me. She had a lot of practice, I think. But so the trick of being a lawyer, I mean, being a lawyer on the outside and being a lawyer on the inside, there is a difference. And you have to be able to do that and to say, okay, how do you want this to look? And even to how we designed our courtroom. You know, we got the opportunity to build a new court building, a new justice building, and we did. And I'm really proud of it. And my assistant, I still think she built it because we used to share an office and she was tired of having me in her office, but she swears that's not true. But I'm not entirely certain. So we built a courtroom, and in that courtroom, we had an artist build a table because I didn't want a bench because I won't wear a robe there at our courthouse. And the bench is a table, and everybody sits around the table, and the table can come apart. When the table is together, it is the river, the Klamath River and all its tributaries, when it's put together. When it's apart, on each side of the face part is a plate that's the bed of the river. You know, and that's done purposely because that's the center. So for us, I think it's worked much better, and we use the table a lot, and we sit around the table to talk things out. And people have a choice there to have a formal trial that you would recognize from TV, or to talk it out. And most of the time, well over 95% of the time, people choose to talk it out. You know, because it isn't about whether you can prove somebody did something or not. You know, I'm not really into that kind of game. What it's really about is, and people said, you know, at first people said, well, why don't you swear people in? Actually, somebody actually asked me that in court. And I said, well, you're a Yurok. If you lie, whose problem is it? He said, well, it's on me and my family. I said, exactly so. Why would I swear somebody in? It's really not my problem. And I'm not going to make it my problem. You know, and most people are not here for lying, frankly. You know, they're here for something else. I don't need that. I expect they're going to tell the truth. And if somebody doesn't, like I said, that's not on me. That's not what I'm here to figure out. And they're sitting across from the person and they're working it out. And it's up to them to say, yes, I did this part, I didn't do this part, I did this part, this is what I'll make up. And for the most part, even with law enforcement, they're willing to talk to that point and work it out. You know, and when we're looking for solutions, I'm looking for them to resolve it and make it right. You know, I'm not really a big fan of just imposing consequences as if that's making it right. You know, a fine or whatever. You know, when people do something, if they can make it right on their own, then let them make it right on their own. If they need help through mediation, or, you know, we have issues like many people that require people to go into treatment, then you help people get treatment and you stay with them through the process. You know, unlike some judges, I visit people when they're in treatment. I will go and talk to people there. When some of our children go off, we call them. I call them and talk to them to see how they are doing. I send our staff to look at the treatment facilities first so that they know the counselors. You know, I have the people set up counseling sessions over the phone so they can talk to their parents and to their siblings and whatever while they're away. You know, and we really try to to follow up and involve people in trying to resolve the issue. You know, when we have issues, I'll say, I mean, here's a couple of examples. This woman came to me who I know and said the name of her grandchild and said, this child, she's run away and there's a warrant out for her arrest. And I said, okay. I said, I thought she was still a baby. I didn't even know she was grown up. And she said, well, she's 11 years old. And I'm like, all right. I said, after work, I'll get one of my probation officers. You get one of her aunts, and we'll go up to Crescent City and we'll find her. You know, between all of us, we ought to be able to outsmart an 11-year-old. That's a little tricky because I hate it when you can't. But, you know, but in this particular instance, it took us about an hour and a half, and we found her. You know, and I got out of the car, and I went over to her, and she turned, and she knew who I was, and she started to run, but her grandma got out of the car and yelled her name, and she froze. And I said, that's good for you, because if I had to chase you, that would have been big trouble, because I'm old, and I would have been really, I won't say what I said, but I would not have been happy. So I'm like, get in the car. You know, so she gets in the car, her auntie was in there, and her grandma's in there, and I said, I have to take you. You're going to be locked up tonight. You're going to go to court. It's going to be a couple of days before we can get you out, and I promise you, I will make sure your grandma and your auntie sees you every day till you get out, and we will stick with you, and I will ask the judge to have you come back home. I said, but I cannot have your grandmother coming in here crying at the end of every workday. I said, we're done with that part. I said, I will not have that. So we talked about it, and I took her in. I surrendered her. She didn't want to be surrendered, but I made her aunt go with me, and we surrendered her. And after she went in the back, I said to the officer that checked her in, I said, this is a child. She's only 11. I get she had makeup on and whatever, and she looked much older. But I want her to cleaned up, and I don't want her put in with the older kids. And, you know, we will try to get her out of here as soon as possible. Well, that was a number of years ago, and she did fine after that. You know, but most judges are not going to do that. But that's what I would expect out of our system to do that. You know, you have to do that. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you can't not participate. So to me, the difference in these two systems to a large extent, and when they talk about that form of justice, is participation. You have to be willing to participate and to talk to people. You know, and sometimes people get mad at me. You know, that happens, but you can't not talk to people just because they get mad. You know, that's not how it works. With big family disputes, we had a situation where you had a woman who had a small child, and the woman died of cancer very young. She was living actually in LA, and the child was with her aunt. The baby's father had remarried in another state, and the baby's grandparents, the mother's people, were at home. And so everybody lawyered up after she died because it happened really quickly. And they came into court to see who was going to get the child. And so we talked a bit for a while, and they had all their lawyers there, and I finally said, look, you know, all you people are in here. I'm the only person who doesn't know this child. Do you really want me to be the one to decide this? Because I said, I don't think that's a great idea personally. I said, I will. I've decided hundreds of cases like this when I was a state court judge, and I will do it. And I said, and sometimes, you know what? Sometimes I'm right. You know, and they were like, whoa. I said, or I can ask your lawyers to sit on the back benches. I can go in my office and you all can talk, because you're the ones who love this child the most, who need to work this up. You know, you're her grown-ups. Do you really want her to have another loss? Because what you're asking me to do is choose 1 out of 3. And if I do that, then there's 2 losers who walk out of here. So maybe it's better if you, who love her the most, figure out how you're going to bring this child up. Nobody meant for this to happen, but it happened. And that's how life is. So I walked back in my office, I checked in on them after about an hour. They said, okay, so I walked back out. I came back in. They knocked on the door, and they said, come back out, Judge. So I did. And they said, well, we worked it out how we're going to share. I said, that's fine. I'll send somebody in here to write it down, and that'll be my order. You know, but my thing for this kind of situation is you have to get people ready to do those decisions. Those really aren't a stranger's decision. And although I knew everybody in that room, it wasn't right for me to be the person to make the decision. You know, and so what you have to do is get back to the values that we used to have. You know, and for the family to step up and see. We had all sorts of ways before we had all the rules and the laws of resolution of these issues. It's not like we didn't have these issues before, because we did. It's just how did we resolve them? You know, that's the whole process here that I really want us to think about. And it does take longer, and it does take the ability, and why I'm pushing some of our young people to go to law school is, don't pretend like you don't know who I'm talking about, Sammy. Look, Sammy's pretending like he doesn't know who I'm talking about. Some people should go to law school. Who would that be? Oh, I don't know. That's what you get, Sammy. See, he was trying to ignore me, but nice try, dude. All right. But it is really important to be able to do both things, because that's the nature of the world today. But it's also very important to not think that this system needs to be imposed on us, because it is not a superior system. It is a broken system even in their own world. And I spent enough time in a fairly good court in San Francisco, and it's a disaster. And some of the decisions I made were disasters. I consider myself, and many people considered, I did it again, sorry, that I did a good job there. You know, much of the time I was either in dependency, which is abuse and neglect, or in delinquency. And sometimes I'd handle 30, 40, 50 matters a calendar. And I was really good at it. You know, and I actually knew more of the people than most of the people in there. But I will say, out of their laws and out of their system, even in something like dependency, which is abuse and neglect, and it was my decision whether a child would stay in this home or be moved, that the only place that I ever lost children, meaning that they died because of my order, was when I put them in foster care. That was a fairly good judge, and I was a fairly good judge. You know, and you can say, well, this, that, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, I'm the one who signed that order. You know, and to me, one of those is enough to say it doesn't work. You know, and it didn't. You know, and you can say, well, under these circumstances, or you should have 6 months, or you should have 18 months, or you should have this. Really? I don't think so. You know, because you don't know what a person needs. You don't know how that's going to be for them or for the child. You know, and children, if you give them a choice, often would rather stay at home, you know, regardless. And how can you support that? And how can you be there? But the thing about having a system is, if you're making that decision and you have all the information and you don't have rigid standards and you let the family be involved, you can come to solutions. You know, I can go live with somebody who's distantly related to me. I couldn't have done that if somebody had said, well, here's the order, here's how it's supposed to be, you know. Really? You know, and that's the thing about the law. It traps you and it narrows you, if you let it, but it doesn't have to. You know, and I'm happy for the restorative justice movement, and I think it may impact the non-tribal system, and I think it needs to. You know, and some of our people are going to be wrapped up in that, and I think it will give them a better understanding and a better way to communicate with the people that they're supposed to be working with. But again, you know, we had ways of doing things, and our values and our stories should drive what we do. And those practices that we call our laws, that we put into our ordinances, need to be those values. And it's really important that that happen. You know, and the law, part of what I do at home is work with the state court judges and try to work with them about how are we going to do this together. Because in California, for instance, I don't have jurisdiction over felonies, which are the more serious crimes. So I was trying to figure out how can I get some of our felons back from the state system. And so I convinced the local judge to let us have them after one particular, we've had a number of people after their first or second strike. And in California, a third strike means you're locked up for the rest of your life, essentially. And so I would go to the judge and say, with our staff, here's the program we have outlined for this person. He's been in your system since he was 8, and now he's about to go away for the rest of his entire life. You know, through your system, he went first into the hall, juvenile hall. He got thrown out of every school that you put him in. Then he went to YA for the youth authority. Then he went to San Quentin, and now he's there for a third strike. So I can't possibly do any worse than you already have done. I mean, to be crass about it. So why don't you let me have him? You've already convicted him, and you're just waiting to sentence him. If you let me have him for a year, and I think we ended up saying 2 years in the end, and he doesn't get in trouble, will you reduce that to a misdemeanor and let it be? And I outlined everything that we were going to do, because I can drug test him, he can be in court much more than he's in court here, and here's all the requirements, and here's the program that he's going to be in. You know, now for the first time in his life, he has a driver's license. He's paid off all of his state fines. He has a job. He built a home from scratch for himself and his family. And 2 weeks ago, I presided at his marriage, which he cried the entire way through. And this guy's like huge. And I'm like, oh, stop it. Because they're like trying to take pictures and he's still crying. I'm like, don't, you know. But the point of it is that we had a different way of talking to him, and he had a different way of talking back. He still has issues, because when you're raised in prison, frankly, you don't have the best of skills, you know, and how to communicate with other people. And he's not the only one that's been through this system. You know, we've taken other people who, I had one, that's the advantage of getting older, who I actually represented as a juvenile, who ended up going to prison for a number of years after he murdered someone and is now out. And again, we helped him with reentry. He's working, he has a child, he has a home, you know, and now he'll be off parole because we spent a lot of time. Other families, we've done the same. All their children were in care. We got all the children back. Because we don't have a time frame that says, okay, well, 6 months from here. No, we have what we want to achieve frames. You know, and whatever time it takes to do that, if you're still working, we'll work with you. You know, and that's the point. because that's the value. And so we make our law and our approach reflect the values, and if it takes me longer, and even though this particular, the first boy, well, he's a man, in the stories, he's no longer on parole since, like I said, from the time he was 8, but he's still, we still visit him. If I hear he's done something I don't particularly care for, I'll send a probation officer out there if he's lucky. Otherwise, I'll catch him. So those are his choices. He'd rather see them. But that's, you can't just go, okay, well, now he's done, because he isn't really done. So you have to stay with that and work with that. And make sure that everybody understands that it's an ongoing process, and not go, okay, well, you did this, so now that's it. There's no that's it with me. I may get mad, but there's no that's it. And that whole thing is a way different thing. Because when you live in a community and you can say, okay, well, I'm going to choose this person over that person, you can't really do that. The law is, in the way I understand it at home, is it's responsibility to and responsibility for. That's what it means to be who we are. And that's an ongoing thing that you have to learn and you have to deal with. And it doesn't say, and here's how many months you get to do it. It says this is what it is. Responsibility to, responsibility for. And that timeline is a very long timeline. And I have benefited from it myself. So I see the value of it. And that's the thing about being a lawyer, being a judge, and having been in both systems, is you do learn the value. And for me, our values are what I'm going to spend the rest of my time here doing, is working on that and hounding Sammy to go to law school. But aside from that, I have an open slate. But that's sort of the point of it, and he's going to. But I'm being nicer to him. I don't know why. That's because he got whacked by Graham too, so he's already been whacked. But the point of this is that right now, and all the time, we have choices. And we're at a place, like you can ask to do this, or you can do this in the way that you know it's right. And I would like to see us do it in the way we know it's right. A lot of people have worked really hard to get us here. And we've heard a lot of people talk, and I really enjoyed yesterday and listening to people talk and hearing what I've heard before, but knowing that it's true and it will always be true. And that we have a chance to do this, and we are responsible to do it. And I guess that's my main point, is that our courts are our courts. And yes, we have all these outside sources. And yes, we have the Supreme Court. And we have all those people doing all this stuff. But the truth of the matter is they just made it up. If you really look at it, they made it up. And I have just as much imagination as they do. And maybe even more. So. All right. Thank you. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Steve. Oh.
Today we're a little more casual, so we're going to offer break. We have a refreshment break waiting for us out there, but please make it back by 11.